Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
And Andy, I have pulled you off of the trails out in the wilds of America's heartland to do this podcast recording. Is that true?
You have indeed. Listeners, you will never know how long it took me and Chris to get this recording thing set up with me on the road. But I am calling in, dialing in, tuning in.
I think dialing in. Let's have some mystique about this podcast.
Okay. I am dialing in from the Rocky Mountains. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So let's see. I have lived in flat Midwest, my entire life. So the mountains are a little bit terrifying to me. So how far up are you right now?
We're at about 7,000 feet right now, or in the low 7,000s. Yeah. So not as high as it gets, but high enough that we notice it hiking around. That we get out of breath a little quicker. So.
Okay. All right. So my picture.
High enough that my Prius may not survive this road trip.
Yeah. Well, if you got up, that's the hard part, right? It's the coming back down. Would be nice and easy. So I guess my mental image of you when I heard about this trip was that you were going to be calling in from a tent off the side of the mountain, but it looks like you're in a fairly nice Airbnb. Not to
Yeah. Well, earlier in this trip, it might have been more tent-like. We stayed at a very rustic, I'll put rustic in quotes there, very rustic cabin in Nebraska for a couple of days. But now we're in a comparatively posh Airbnb in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. So.
Oh, nice. That's really
I guess if we have any listeners in Pagosa Springs, I'm right here. Although I'll be gone by the time you hear this. So
yeah, you can come and see the spot that Andy slept. Yeah, okay. So I don't want to talk about your specific vacation itinerary the entire time, but it just is kind of a way of hey, why does this episode sound a little bit different from the other ones? That's what's going on for you the listeners. So I have I think a fun thing that I want to talk about after this. We're not going to roll on the table this time just because we don't have as much time as we normally do. But you said before we started recording that you had kind of a question for me that you wanted to ask.
Well, I have a little story to relate that's that's RPG related. And I guess I'll start with a quick question for you. Chris, you're going on a trip. Don't think about this. You're going on a trip and you've got... What game are you putting? What RPG are you putting into the suitcase? Don't think about it.
Okay, so I just went on a trip last weekend to visit some family, so this is very fresh in my mind. So the two games that I grabbed, I grabbed all I grabbed the 5e Player's Handbook and the starter set and just threw that together because if anyone mentions D&D even obliquely, I'm just going to pull this out. we'll try to play. This is the easiest possible introduction for it. Another one that I threw in there was the One Ring RPG. Again, if someone even mentioned Lord of the Rings in some fashion, I was going to be like, well, Yeah. So those are the two apparently that I would throw in my bag right before I leave. Yeah. What about you?
It's funny. I almost threw in the One Ring. But I didn't at the last minute because I was like, I think this book costs $60.
Yeah.
And so when it gets dropped in the mud and rained on and things like that, I'll be annoyed. But I did toss in Blades in the Dark.
Oh, nice.
Just because I enjoy reading that book. And although I've run it and I've read it many times, I still don't totally understand it. So I feel like if I keep rereading it, one day enlightenment will happen and I'll be the perfect Blades GM.
Yeah, your third eye will open and you'll realize actually the book wasn't needed all along. Yeah.
That's right. It was in the system was inside me all along.
Yeah.
So I have a quick story to tell then about this. So I don't know if you are as dorky as me, but when I go on trips and we stop in motels for the evening, and it's usually middle of nowhere Midwest, so there's nothing exciting to do except just go to bed. I will search for game stores near me in the hopes that there might be a game store a mile or two away. There almost never is, but every now and then I get to go and see a game store from a different part of the country, which is fun. Let's see. The other day we were stopped for the night in Colorado, and this is eastern Colorado, the hot, flat part. So it's just Wild West desert, tumbleweeds, 95 degrees. And we stop for the night. And I plug in to Google Maps game store near me. and I get a return that there's a game store 1 mile from my present location, which is bonkers because I don't even know if the place we were staying counted as a town.
Yeah.
So I looked. So go ahead and just speak up when I hit the part in the story where you would have stopped. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So maybe we've already hit that point. I don't know.
No,
so
we have not hit that point yet. Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. So obviously I've got to go see this game store, and I'm not going to name it. I don't want to name and shame it. I'll just say this story ends on a sinister note, but I bet everybody involved is a wonderful human being, and I love that they have a game store in the middle of Colorado. But it's got great reviews on Google Maps, and I'm enough of a dork. I've done the game store near me search enough times. I'm good at looking at the photos and like trying to evaluate, do they have an RPG shelf, and what kind of books do they have? Because, you can recognize if it's just all 5e books,
Yeah.
And, if it's an all 5e shop or something, nothing bad against D&D, but, I don't need to make a trek out to see it.
Yeah.
But this one, so I can't tell if they have RPGs, but they have a lot of stuff you would call RPG adjacent. So I see some old, like, used war games, which I love. There's model train stuff, and it seems like, okay, this will be an interesting store to go. So I take my teenager and we hit the road in our Prius. So even though it's only 1 mile away, Google Maps takes us through a back roads to get there. And by back roads, I mean dirt roads. So we drive about a mile down a dirt county road. There's this huge plume of dust following our Prius.
Yeah.
At some point, you pass a farmer driving something that should be harvesting spice on Arrakis or something. Yeah. And everybody else is in a Ford F-150, and you're banging along this dirt road in the Prius. But so we pull up and we pass it a couple of times because I can't see. So we're not in anything remotely resembling a business district. It's just farmland, like just farmland.
Okay.
So we drive past the address a couple of times. And then I realize, okay, I think it's in there's like one house we've passed. I think it's in a house or something. So we pull around. So you ready to stop?
Yeah. Okay. At this point, this is where I'd be thinking like, cool. So this is a magic game shop that is only here for one night. And I don't know if I should go in there.
Yes. So sure enough, so we pull around for like the third time past this, and there is one house, and just imagine the house in like rural farm Colorado. It's got a couple of giant pickup trucks parked in the yard, and so I see as we pull into this house's driveway, like a faded wooden sign that has the name of this hobby shop on it. Okay, and so. Like I pause for a minute in the driveway, and I mean, am I expected to go up to the house? I don't think so. So a little bit more investigation results. So there is a little track going back behind the house towards like a cluster of structures back there. Feeling increasingly nervous, we continue on this dirt path past the house. So we roll past probably 10 to 15 like rusted out cars parked along the side, and we pull up to a barn, a barn. Yeah. And it has the hobby shop store. It has a sign on the top of the barn. Yeah. And it's just a regular barn. It doesn't look like it was fashionably renovated into a modern space. So we get out, and it has an open sign on the door, no windows or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But it was locked despite the open sign. So that was when my teenager said, this is straight out of a horror movie. And I started thinking, this is pretty much the gamer version of like a creepy white van with like free candy painted on the side. Yes. So we got back into the Prius, and I nervously drove the Prius past. Like, and I half expected someone with a pitchfork or something to come running out of the house and intercept us on their way out. But we made it back out, and we got back to our motel safely. So that is my little anecdote. Like I say, I haven't named the store, and I don't know how you if for some reason, I'm sure the people running it were lovely people, and that's awesome. But it was a hilarious experience.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm
any
sure
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm sure if you Googled it now, you would not be able to find it ever again because it doesn't exist.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like I'm
Or
a little surprised.
now it's in South Dakota or something like that because it just.
Yeah, or like as you were leaving, as you turned around to leave, like the barn was in front of you again, right? Like it's just like you can't. It's basically the setup to a Twilight Zone episode.
Totally. So, but now I'm bothered because look, what if it was the gaming store? You know, that amazing out of the way treasure that no one's heard of, and he's got all this amazing out of print stuff and all this stuff. You know. So I'm not going to lie. I don't know if we're going through that town again, but I'll have to make a saving throw going back home if we go through town.
You gotta stop
to test that door again.
Yeah, you have to stop because because like it's probably just a normal game store that some nerds like they really wanted to do this and they had a spare barn, so whatever, they set it up in there. But the possibility that you walk in there and it's like a frozen in time, like 90s game store. The person running it has like no clue what the internet is, right? So they haven't looked up prices on anything, but they just have a stack of whatever,
Yes, it's all the original prices from like 1978. And,
I know. Yeah, I still remember there was a hardware store nearby where I went to college that we would, it was like the local hardware store. So if you needed a screw or whatever, that's where you had to go. Super small town Indiana. And this was in 2000, like in the early 2000s or so. I remember, and they had a dusty display case sort of in the back that still had a couple of sealed NES games. Just like sitting in there, right? And they were like priced once when they got them in, so it's just like a sealed copy of like Tetris or whatever in there, and like I still think about them, like I wonder if I went back there if it'd still be there. It's like stuff like that. I mean, I feel like the internet sort of collapsed some of that discovery of I don't know, information asymmetry, if you will. But oh my goodness, so you have to stop at that game store on the way back, please.
I will. And, I do haunt game stores wherever I can, as I travel. And maybe once every 5 years, I do find one of those treasures where they obviously don't use the internet and they just price it. It looks like $5 to them. I've gotten a couple of pretty collectible RPG books in that way for laughable prices. And I love those places. They always have so much character and, but at some point the use of the internet, and very appropriately, became ubiquitous, and it's hard to find those out of the way places with prices that aren't competitive. So
I know, if you find them, I guess don't share it.
Exactly.
It's like finding the good fishing hole or whatever.
So I will say, if you just don't ever hear from me after this, Chris, you can maybe follow my track to Colorado one day, or maybe gather up some former podcast guests and make a road trip out of finding what happened to me.
I mean, this is literally the start to a Call of Cthulhu campaign right here. Right? It's like, the last, like a modern day one, the last missive you heard was, the podcast from about the game store that doesn't exist.
Yes. Yeah. What if it is the best game store you've ever imagined, and I just decide to stay there? I mean, talk to my family about it, but
you stay there, and then the current owner can then leave finally. So it's great. That's right. It works out for everybody.
Okay, so that's my travel anecdote. I'm sorry for going along for so long, but I thought of you at a couple of points as I wondered if I was about to find an awesome stash of used games, or if I was about to be skinned alive by a chainsaw wielding maniac. So.
Yes. That's really great. Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what's been the most game worthy thing you've seen out on your hikes and your travels and stuff. That seems like a pretty good one. Do you have like a number two?
Yeah.
You seen any like a cool wildlife or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, I did have this thought, and once again, I reveal myself as a broken person. That even in the grandeur of the Rocky Mountains, like 30% of my brain is doing GM related thinking. Yeah. But, so just today we were driving out into a forest out here, and we had to drive like 10 or so miles to get down another dirt road back into a state park or whatever it is. And along the way, I have never seen this before. We saw dozens and dozens and dozens of prairie dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never seen like a herd of prairie dogs.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah.
It was amazing. It was amazing. And my game takeaway from that, I guess, is that was an incredible, like, quote, travel encounter that, like, I never would have guessed we would have. It will actually end up being significantly more memorable than the awesome hiking destination that we reached. I'm just going to remember those prairie dogs, and we gave up counting after, dozens of them went by. And it was just incredible. I've never seen it. And it just, it does make me think, it's like that holy grail, like the non-combat encounter, like non-combat travel or random encounter that's just really memorable or interesting. And I guess if you're, it makes me want to go home and write up some random tables of just some like curious wildlife encounters that are super linked to the place that you're in. I mean, how many places in the U.S. can you find herds of prairie dogs? I don't really know, but this is the first I've seen. I've traveled in a lot of states. Yeah. And I love, it makes me want to make up a big list and just brainstorm like what just like memorable thing could you have that your PCs and your party would be reminiscing about for years to come? Because my family has been chatting about the prairie dog herd since we saw it hours ago. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm thinking back to my family went on a lot of road trips, like for summer vacations and stuff. So we would do kind of what you're doing, so you'd go somewhere for a week or two like that. And like all of the memories I have that have like really stuck out, the ones that we talk about are like that time we saw that weird thing, right? When we saw, like saw bison, or like there was like an elk that it was like a moose that stuck its face into our car at one point because my sister had rolled down her window. It was like stuff like that. It was just like, I don't know. I think part of this is just like, right, you live in the city, you're not around like wildlife ever, so it's like anything sort of seems novel like that. But as you were talking about the prairie dogs, it reminded me of the video game The Last of Us, and so I guess a spoiler for The Last of Us, which has been out for 10 years or whatever. But there's a scene in that game that like finally like quiets down, because for the most part like you're running around shooting people or shooting zombies and stuff like that. But you I think you're in a zoo or something, and like a giraffe walks by, and like the whole game sort of like stops, and it's just this moment that like really sticks with you, right? Like, I mean, despite the fact that you're like this, I don't know, you're kind of like this awful person going around killing people, right? Like there's this moment of like this pure awe of like a giraffe walking across in America, right? Like it was in the zoo, right? And the zoo shut down because it's a post-apocalyptic thing like that. But I mean, like that moment narratively sticks out, really well. I think like it's in the same way that prairie dogs do too, right? Because that's not something you can just experience in any other.
Well, I've played Last of Us, and that is my single biggest memory from the game Last of Us, which I loved. Yeah, and I honestly don't think I could tell you about a single like combat encounter, except that you fight lots of zombies. I couldn't tell you anything more specific than that about those, but I vividly remember the giraffe encounter. It's just an amazing moment. And you can't even do anything. You're just watching it.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. So we went to the Toledo Zoo last week. So the little trip that I went on, we went to the zoo, and then we met up with my family in South Bend. I'll get to the South Bend part in a second. But like, just going to the zoo is always a wonderful experience, especially with kids who haven't been there before too, right? So like, I don't know, like my daughter and my son got to see an elephant for the first time in person. That's right. It's one of those things that awesome. You tell them what an elephant sounds, and it's got a trunk, and like, you show them videos and stuff on an elephant, and then you go and see one in person. You're like, wow, like this is, I don't know, this thing is massive. And and then you think about it like in gaming terms, it's like, right, like if a full grown elephant came across your party, like what would your party do? Like if it got mad at you, there's like very little you can do to an elephant, in like a fantasy setting, I guess. Right. There's lots of clever things you can do too. But I mean, it's a very like majestic thing that I think we take for granted. It's like, oh yeah, elephants, whatever. But then you see one and you're like, oh, okay. That kind of stops you in my tracks.
Part of the the impact of these kind of random encounters is just being in awe or appreciation of something that you haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard to convey. That's really hard to convey in a novel, like even a really good one. You know, I love The Lord of the Rings, and I have come to love the travel sections of The Lord of the Rings, but it is hard to describe being impressed by something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how exciting was it to hear me talk about the prairie dogs? I mean, probably not that exciting, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard enough in a novel and stuff like that. And in a tabletop RPG, if the only action the party can really take is to be in awe of the site or the ruin or the animal or something like that, how do you make that interesting? You know, I mean, have you seen that happen really well in a tabletop game?
You know, I think the closest I've gotten to that is really directly asking players to react in a sentence or two to something that's happening around them, like, because then they can make it more personal to their characters. You can set the scene or, you know, set the memory or whatever that they need to react to, but then allowing them like total agency over, like, this is how I'm reacting emotionally to what it is, right? And I think you can ask that pretty directly of players as well, and they'll rise to the occasion, because, like, right, like you know, especially like for me, at least as a player, when those moments happen, that's the stuff that helps me figure out the character more than anything else. It's like, I need to stop and like really think, like, how would they react in this situation, right? It's not just like I don't know, am I going to use my sword or my my like staff? And this, you know, it's like how does your character feel about what they're seeing? I mean, I think that's maybe one way to get across that too, especially if you have something that's like a novel thing within your game too. If you can describe it, it's like, you know, like, okay, like you're coming up, you know, you round the bend and this is the first sight that you see of this mountain range that's easily 1,000 miles in the distance. You know, that's your, like, what you're heading towards. Like, what does your character think about seeing the mountains for the first time? Right. Like, you know, I think you can manufacture some of that awe a little bit just by asking a direct question of, like, let's react to this. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to mention, we stayed in South Bend with, I met up with a bunch of my family there, and there's like, we're not Catholic and we're not football fans, so South Bend is sort of like whatever to me in general. But like it happens to have this really nice like mansion that we've rented a couple times to meet up, which is great, right? If you have 20 plus people that you want to get into one spot, like your options are limited for places to stay. Yeah, so I mean, this mansion it's the sort of place that, like, you know, you keep turning corners and there's rooms in it. Right. And like, it's the sort of place you walk into, you're like, wow, this would be a phenomenal place to hold a murder mystery, or, you know, it really does get your GM juices sort of like flowing. Because they've also decorated each of the rooms basically with like any antiques they could find in there, right? So there's all sorts of like curious looking, like, you know, drawers and, you know, like desks and couches and things like that in there. But so there are a couple of things that struck me. So we ended up playing hide and seek, because I have a lot of nephews and nieces and stuff running around.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah, so playing hide and seek in a place like that is just like so great, right? Because there's 20 rooms or something like that to run around.
Yeah.
Run around in. And like, I mean, you know, everybody can get into it too. So that was really fun, and just like really fun to see, especially with the little kids, sort of what they gravitated towards, because you could tell like which rooms were their favorites, right? And like what they really liked and which rooms were scary to them and stuff. But from like a GMing perspective, right? Like looking at a place like that, it was really fascinating to me, because like especially in the past couple of years, I haven't been inside other buildings that much, right? So this is like one of the only other buildings I've been to. Like, you can make your way from front door to the top of the building, and then all the way back down to the back door. You know, it'd take you 2 minutes or so, right? But if like you just walk and you know exactly where you're going, like that's how long it takes, right? So it got me thinking about like the 5-room dungeon, right? Like, you know, like, and how quickly one could navigate that if they know exactly where they're going. Right. You know, so if you have this, you know, mini room mansion, right? Like how fast you can walk through it is not necessarily like how much time you're going to spend in it.
For sure.
As well, right? And then also just like how sound travels and stuff like that, right? Like if you're inside a building, everything's very interconnected with each other, right? So I think the next time that I run like a smallish dungeon like that, that's really going to be on my mind of like, like the entrance to this and maybe your final destination in here could only be like the matter of 30 feet or so, really a distance, and a couple of walls or something like that may or may not be soundproof, right? So like you have some different considerations there. Yeah, but at the same time, right, there's tons of places to hide too, right? And like just having lots and lots of like those places and stuff, I think can add some interest into it. But yeah, that's just that's sort of what I've been thinking about. Like even since leaving that place, and kind of keep noodling on it. I'm like, I think I might just like run a game in that in that place at some point too.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Chris, we should probably wrap up pretty soon here, but I have a kind of different question for you, and that is, so both you and I think, are gearing up to run later this summer games that we've described as white whale games.
Yes.
Games that we've always kind of wanted to run, or we've thought about it, but for whatever reason we've never got around to running. And I'll just state up front, I haven't yet decided what game I'm going to run.
Yeah.
Because so many of my white whales are these really implausible, long, multi-year campaigns with, tons and tons of different players, and that's why I haven't run those.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking, in the context of a one-shot, what's a one-shot that I could run that I have always kind of wanted to do? So I'm still noodling on that myself, but I wanted to ask if you have what you want to run for your white whale one-shot later this summer.
Yeah, okay. I'm still a little bit torn. I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to do there. And if I can get some more energy than what I have right now, there's something I really want to do, but I don't know if it'll come together. So that might remain a white whale for a while, and that's the sort of thing that needs to be secret from everybody until I have it ready to go.
For sure.
So the thing that I'm probably going to end up running is I've always wanted to do this, is a level 20 boss fight in Dungeons and Dragons. Just like you are maxed out, like you are fighting a demigod or above, or multiples of them, right? Just like one of those kind of all out battles, like the final boss fight. I think just knowing myself, I'm probably not going to be able to take a party from 1 to 20. Yeah, maybe ever, but definitely not for the next 5 or 6 years. So just got young kids. It's just not in the cards or so. So rather than just sort of waiting around for that magical time to happen, I think that's the thing I want to run. It's just like everybody bring your favorite character that never made it to 20, like level them up for this thing. I'm going to come up with some sort of reason why you have all these people sort of coming together, and I will be borrowing heavily from Moorcock for that, I think, because Moorcock loves that sort of like, oh, this person from that universe and this person from that universe, just like, you're together now. So I'll figure out something like that, and then figure out like what we're gonna do for the actual boss fight. So we'll see. I hope that can come together. My guess is I'm going to learn a couple things about like what I like and don't like about high level combat through that. But I think it'll be a really fun thing to actually do, and I think it'll be like it's just gonna be a fun time for those that get to play.
That does sound really fun. Maybe as we get closer to the date, we could talk a little bit more specifically about how you're prepping for it. Because the first thing that popped into mind when you described that is it's really the fun of it is really going to depend on the ability of the players to wrap their heads around the capabilities of their characters.
Yes,
and so if you are this one would make a huge difference if you're playing with experienced D&Ders or you're playing with like newbies for whom that sounds like just like a really fun idea.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of mechanical intensity that, a good high level character should be bringing into the fight. And that at least the bosses, the top level bosses I've seen set it up in 5e, really expect that you're bringing your A game, including magic items, into the fight. So I would love to hear, if you do decide to do that, what kind of player help you're going to have available, if any, I guess. I mean, you could also just say experts only come if you can get behind the wheel of a 20th level character and be able to handle it, right? I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, I might have to do that. And I think it'll also be, like all good D&D, it'll be a little bit hand wavy too with some of the mechanics as we get into it too, I'm sure. But yeah, I think it'll be fun, right? Like it'll be more of a my intent is to bring something that's really going to be fun for everybody too at the table, but I also want it to be somewhat of like a learning experience of like, okay, so at the end of this, you should know whether or not this is something you ever want to do again. It's for everybody. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I were going to do that, I would do the one boss fight that has never happened in my GMing, but that has always lurked out of reach, and that's take down the Balrog, or some variant of that. So I've given more thought to that dumb scenario than is merited at all by my actual gaming history. But.
Well, I think that might be, I might have to, off air, I'm going to push you more on your white whales, because I think you've mentioned this Balrog fight before, and I think that would be pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the joke that we had earlier, I don't know if we said it's on air or not, was that like it's just a party full of Gandalfs or something.
Well, you've got the White Council or whatever, this is their job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do it. Yeah.
It's what they're being paid to do.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting thinking about a white whale one shot. What I really find myself torn between is running something weird and unusual in structure, or running like an interesting game that I want to run, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would want to do both of those things in 1 3-hour one shot, but so that's where my head is about that. And I know that as the summer goes on, I will have some details to share about where my mind is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Well, we should wrap it up there. I know it's getting late for you, getting late for me. But yes, thank you all for listening to this. This has been a little bit more of a freewheeling conversation, but it made a little bit more sense just with Andy being on the road, but I think it was still a fun one. As always, if you have any feedback, you can contact us. There's a contact page on our website, or you can just reach out to us in whatever way makes sense to you. Andy, any other parting shots before I do our final wrap up?
I don't think so. Let's just give a salute to our partner podcast. The Roll for Topic is part of the Roll for It podcast network, and our sister podcast, The Splat Book, is a wonderful podcast that airs on alternate weeks from ours. And if you enjoy Roll for Topic, I have a feeling you will enjoy The Splat Book as well. So Go check it out.
Yeah, they've been doing a couple of actual plays this summer. Go check it out. It's been really fun. And their back catalog is great, too. John and Kyle are some of my favorite people. So I'm super happy every time an episode drops.
Yeah.
Get to hear them talk about games and play games. So, all right. I think that is it for us. So I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
Remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.